You have the entire United States government for the first time saying, yeah, this is a problem. Crisis is 1,000 times worse than COVID-19 because it's affecting our children.
You said there's no Republican or Democrat kids, there's just kids. How do we get the other side?
Well, our job is just to keep telling the truth and then turn it over to God.
Autism and other issues, it's just better diagnostic. There's not a change, we're just better awareness now.
If it was better diagnostics, you'd see it in 70-year-old men.
As far as looking at the causes of autism, anything that people should know about?
I mean, autism is...
Secretary Kennedy, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Will.
My goodness. We talked years ago, I don't know if you remember, Cleveland, we were in a restaurant having lunch. You were there when you were running for president, the Democratic Party. And I said, there's something ineffable. There's a spiritual quality to this. Who would have thought these years later, could you ever imagine that you'd be used in this way, that this prayer would have been answered?
I didn't imagine that. No, I did not. So but I'm very, very grateful. And, I just live one day at a time, one step at a time, try to do the next right thing. And I'm really grateful that God put me in this position because I think we can change something that's fundamental about our country and about our children's health.
Yeah. I heard you talk about praying daily that you would be used, like God used me. And I think it's a testament to, we think our prayers aren't going to be answered or it's not going to happen in the way that we ever dreamt of, right?
I mean, that's the way life works.
Yeah.
Like I said, I also, I try to live my life without expectations. And so I don't try to imagine where I'm going to be in a year or 2 years, but really try to live in the present and then try to keep doing, the next right thing.
Yeah.
And miracles happen.
Miracles happen. What's this report? You're immersed in these topics, these statistics for years. This has been your life. What is the most shocking for you, the details of this report?
Well, the importance of the report is it really begins a national dialogue. The people like you who've been talking about this for 20 years, about this crisis in our kids' health and what's happening to our food supply and what's happening with all the toxics in the environment. They were essentially outliers. And what you have today is you have the entire United States government for the first time saying, yeah, this is a problem. And it's going to be the central focus of this government to try to solve this problem. And, the report was a collaborative report. It emerged from as a consensus statement by all the departments, not just one department, but, we had the USDA working on this, Brooke Rollins, we had Lee Zeldin, we had the trade representatives, we had all of the different arms of the United States government that have now reached this extraordinary and radical consensus that this is an existential threat to our country.
Yeah.
And that we have to prioritize this the way that we prioritize. This is a crisis 1,000 times worse than COVID-19 because it's affecting our children.
Yeah.
COVID-19 was affecting people, mostly people in the last years of their lives. But here we've got an entire generation that is damaged from this. And you can walk through an airport, you can see the mitochondrial dysfunction, you can see the inflammation. You talk to teenagers today and, it's very rare to find somebody who doesn't have an allergy problem, who doesn't have an autoimmune illness, that doesn't have some kind of neurological dysfunction. And we're destroying our capital. We're destroying the most important equity that we have, which is the health of our kids, their capacity to experience happiness, their capacity to fulfill their potential. We're destroying their potential at the very beginning of their lives.
Yeah. And all of this should be non-political, should be bipartisan, right? Like you said, there's no Republican or Democrat kids, there's just kids. How do we get the other side that otherwise would be for all of this? People like Cory Booker, people like Bernie Sanders, they talk about these things, but because there's so much tribalism, they can't look past it. How is there hope for bipartisanship?
I don't know. I can't answer that question, but our job is just to keep telling the truth and then, turn it over to God.
Yeah. Amen to that. Autism. Okay. Big, complex topic. What you talk about later this year, kind of really talking to the American people about the causes of autism, what data is out there as you're coming into HHS, like as far as looking at the causes of autism, anything that people should know
I
about?
mean, autism is a crisis, and it became a crisis in the early 1990s.
Yeah.
So there was the largest epidemiological study ever done was done in 1970, specifically looking in the state of Wisconsin at every child in the state, 900,000 children, to see what the autism rate was. And at that time, it was 0.7 in 10,000, so less than 1 in 10,000. And today, most recently, 3 weeks ago, CDC released its most recent data, which is 1 in 31 children. It's actually much worse than that because the surveys are done state by state. And California has the best collection system and ascertainment system. And California's figures are 1 in every 20 children and 1 in every 12.5 boys. So this is existential. And the cause of autism, it will be by 1930 or 2030, $1 trillion a year. That's existential. We have 75% of our kids can't qualify for military service. So and then we have a fertility crisis as well that's going along with that. Children today, boys today in our country have half the testosterone, half the sperm count as 65-year-old men, 68-year-old men. And girls are hitting puberty 6 years early.
What do you say to people that, especially autism, these other chronic, let's just say autism and other issues, it's just better diagnostics, that there's not a change, we're just better awareness now?
Yeah, that's just an industry canard, and a common sense should tell you that's just nonsense, because if it was better diagnostics, you'd see it in 70-year-old men, and you don't see it in 70-year-old men. It's still 1 in 10,000 in my age group.
Yeah.
It's affecting children.
Right.
And so it's not. But also, there's been study, because the industry has promoted that canard.
Yeah.
There have been numerous studies to determine whether that's true or not. And all of those studies have come back and said, no, this epidemic is real.
Well, and there's all these co-occurring conditions too. And I think sometimes people want to parse the terminology, right? Because there are high functioning, autism as a neurotype, you wouldn't even know them.
I mean, autism really, it's kind of a mistake to characterize the entire spectrum under one label.
Yes.
Because people who are high functioning have very, very different symptomology than people in that 26.5% of children diagnosed with autism are nonverbal, non-toilet trained, and the presentation of their disease is very, very different. Whereas the higher functioning people of autism tend to be have social IQ problems. The people who are most debilitated by it are actually empaths. So they have a very, very high rate of social sensitivity. There's a lot of other differences, but we're stuck with a label. And it's a label that really is inapplicable across the spectrum. But the kids are most affected are the ones that I've worked with for so many years, the parents of those children. They're not on social media because they don't have the time. They're much less vocal, and they have not had a voice. And I've tried to give them a voice for the past 20 years.
You have. That's where I met you, actually, years ago in Dallas. It was at Generation Rescue. We both were speaking at Generation Rescue in the autism community. Okay, I want to set the record straight for the budget cuts, because it's always the talking points that they're cutting budgets to Narcan and opioid, or they're cutting budgets to women's health. And I've heard you talk about the reallocation of money. It's not that there's no budget cuts. We're still going to give attention to these important topics. Or are there cuts to things that, because of DOGE and these other departments within the government?
No, I mean, listen, my department over the last 4 years during the Biden administration grew by 38%. And public health went down. Right. So throwing money at the issue was not the solution. We've tried to make cuts that are sensible. We try not to cut working scientists. Some people who are scientists were cut. There are people who were running divisions. They're not. We tried not to cut anybody who was actually in the lab doing real science or frontline workers. So there's, there was tremendous redundancies in our department. We have dozens of programs for opioid addiction, and we consolidated those. We had dozens for maternal health. We have dozens of programs for behavioral health. I think 46 behavioral health programs. And each one has their own silo, their own administrators, their own comms department. We have over 100 communications departments. We had 40 procurement departments with 4 separate computer systems. And so there's tremendous opportunity to make cuts without hurting programs. And that's what we tried to do.
Well said. We're limited on time. The podcast is called The Art of Being Well. At the end, we have Your Art of Being Well. I want to have you back for a full conversation, Secretary. So what's the worst tasting healthy food that you eat? You don't do it for the taste, you do it for the benefits.
I eat food that I like.
Love it.
I don't, and I'm not, I don't consider myself a role model, but I eat a lot of protein. I try to do intermittent fasting, so I try not to eat in the morning or in the evening. And it works very well for me, but I eat whatever I want, and I eat large amounts of food. But it's mainly protein and vegetables. And then, I will have potatoes. I try to stay away from bread and pasta, but I'm not perfect at it.
Yeah.
So, I'm pretty eclectic in the way that I eat.
What do you take supplements? And if so, like what are 2 maybe lesser known supplements that people may find interesting?
Oh, I don't know. And people shouldn't pay attention to me. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a doctor. I take a lot of supplements, but I don't do it in an organized way.
Yeah.
And I take supplements that I'll read an article about, and I'll have 2 or 3 people tell me you should be taking turmeric, or and that's how I kind of put together. I did have to do a kind of a recently with a couple of integrative doctors. They asked me what my supplements were, so I took pictures of them and sent them to me, and both of them said, "Oh, that's a really good collection. You must have a good advisor." And I did. It was just dumb luck, I think.
Amazing.
But I take vitamin D, I take zinc, I take quercetin, and I don't know. It's all kind of voodoo to me. Oh, I don't feel better immediately when I do that, but I can tell you that I had really bad problems with brain fog 20 years ago, and with word retention, and with name retention, and retrieval. And I don't have that anymore.
Amazing.
And so I think something I'm doing is working. I can't point to any one thing and tell you what it is, because I try everything.
Yeah. Is there any out of the box, unconventional things you've done for your wellness, biohacks, things like this that you're willing to admit?
I try all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But I can't point to you to one intervention and say, hey, that changed my life. I do hyperbarics. I do, I've done everything. I've done red light lasers, red light saunas. And, I just think the main thing for people to do is to get exercise, to try to sweat.
Yeah.
And to not eat anything that comes in a package.
Yeah.
Don't eat anything that has more than 3 ingredients. Try to eat food that is clean food. That's all. That's the only, that's what I do. I don't give people advice.
Yeah. What's a book that you've read? It could be fiction or nonfiction. I'm getting a running Art of Being Well book club. What should I add to the list?
Oh, I think Casey and Kelly Means' book is great.
Yeah.
Mark Hyman's book on the sugar fix is what is it? The 10-day
sugar fix,
sugar detox.
Yeah.
That is food fix. Food fix I've read.
Food fix is amazing.
Great. And the 10-day sugar detox is a good one.
I have to ask you before we go. Dr. Casey Means is a good friend of mine. What do you think of the sort of pushback on social media and within the media? Why is she so offensive?
I think she's offensive to people who don't want change.
Amen.
And, you know, Casey is going to be unique. She, as you know, she's one of the most eloquent and articulate, and she has credibility. She, unlike, you know, the Times reported that she's not, it wasn't a doctor, she was, and she still has a medical license. And all of that was baloney. But I think it was, you know, I think there's people who don't want to see her. I think there's vested interests that don't want to see people like that. And I've been able to bring really great people, Dr. Oz, Jay Bhattacharya, Marty McCary, and, you know, at every tier of my agency, there's extraordinary people who are going to transform this country.
Amen. Secretary, it's been an honor to have you. God bless you, my friend.
Good to see you,
Good to
too.
see you.